piece of the planet. You know what it is. It's Adisa, the Bishop. We're chilling. It's back to Bishop Chronicles. And look, I know it's been a little weird. I've been talking about Money Mondays, popping up on Tuesdays. This one's popping up on a Wednesday. It's because I've been sick. I've been kind of trying to get my sea legs back to getting back to a regular world. Nevertheless, though, David Frazee stays ever vigilant, and he is with us again. And we're talking about the real deal stuff. Not that we haven't before, but we're talking about the real deal stuff that's probably really important to you, and that's the red zone, when it's going bad and what it means and how we get out of it. David, Demystifying Silicon Valley and demystifyingwealth.com. Go to them both. Welcome back to Bishop Chronicles.
Great to be back.
So we're talking about the red zone. We've gone through a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff. In fact, I've actually decided I'm going to go ahead and start opening up some of those accounts. I just got to go rob a few banks to get the money. But as soon as it comes in, I'm going to start doing stuff.
And if you ever heard the quote, why do you rob a bank? And the answer is that's where they keep the money. So
that is exactly where they keep the money. And so I'm excited about it, because now I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get it. One of my friends hit me today, and he's like, hey, when you're on there talking to David, sometimes you seem like really vulnerable and not clear on stuff. I said, I am vulnerable and not clear on stuff.
This is not a rehearsed act. It's actually true.
No, I said, so, I really am learning from scratch, and this is good. But let's talk about the red zone. What is it, and how do we start getting out?
Yeah, let me, before I architect the way I'd like to think about the next few weeks, yes. I actually will encourage you to take money out of banks, because you shouldn't keep it unless it's a high yield savings account, which we talked about. Right. Otherwise, keep the minimum there. You need to cover a month or month and a half. Otherwise, invest it in a brokerage. So there's no thing called a red zone in the world. This is my idealized fantasy of having something color coded so people think it's pretty and pay more attention to it. So up on the screen here, we got priority 1, or the red zone, which is to pay off toxic debt. And debt that I consider toxic is over 10%. And that's because that's roughly more than you would get if it was invested in the stock market. Some people want to pay off debt over 5 or 7%. I mean, you can change it as you see fit, but to me, it's 10%. Right. And so your 2 goals here are going to be pay off your toxic debt and start an emergency fund. While I have the chart up, just to foreshadow here, we're going to talk in the next few weeks about the orange and the yellow, the green and the blue, which is how you build wealth. So what you really want to be able to do is have excess income. So you can get rid of medium interest debt, like say 5 to 10% or 5 to 7%, 4 to 7%, wherever you want to draw that line. Complete your emergency fund, take your full employer match in your 401k. We'll talk more about that, but that's free money because the employer's matching you dollar for dollar. So that's $2. That's a good deal. Hard to beat that. Maximize that Roth IRA because, again, that's tax free when you take it out. Health savings accounts, I'll talk about a little bit. It's not really something most people can do, but people are really gung-ho about it. And it's actually like the best deal out there, even better than a Roth, but it doesn't apply to everybody. The yellow zone is savings for specific near-term items like that wedding, the trip, save for college, also maxing out your 401k. And then when you get to priority 4, you can consider paying off low interest debt. I actually personally wouldn't do that, and I'll tell you why. Because if your mortgage is at 2%, invest it for 10. I mean, that's just good math. Right. Unless you just don't want to be in debt, which is, it's your life. Right. Save for longer term priorities. Start to save outside of retirement accounts. And the final zone, the blue zone, this is where I want to get everyone, is giving and philanthropy, and then work optional retirement. I mean, I will be doing things until they bury me in the ground or aquamate my body, or which we should talk about aquamation someday. But instead of,
I've looked into it.
It's much more environmentally friendly. So please stop. Considering your body with flames is like driving a car 500 miles. Don't do that. But until that day happens, I will be working, but I want to have it work optional. And I think that's the goal for a lot of people. So I just want to walk you through there's no purple zone. We can come up with one if we want, but complete the rainbow. But there's a whole cascade here. The reason I really want to start with the red is you can't do anything until you have excess income. And if you have high interest debt, you don't have excess income by definition, because you have to be paying this stuff down. I mean, that's you're paying 22% to somebody else, basically. If it's credit cards, 23%, whatever your rates are, in some cases 27. Your first, second, third priority is pay that debt off. And that's what I want to really talk about today is what do you do when you're in this zone? And I don't just want to make it sound like there's always a plan, because sometimes the plan is give up. And that's actually not a defeatist argument. It's sometimes the most optimistic thing you can do. But let's get there a little bit later.
Okay, so let's just start with the red zone. Let's go to it.
Yeah. So there's two things, as you recall, in the red zone, which is you want to start that emergency fund and you want to pay down the high interest debt. I mean, my personal temptation is just focus on paying the cards down first and ignore having any savings or pad. That's actually not the best thing to do. And the reason for that is very simple. We talked in the very first few sessions about what scarcity does to people, lowered executory function, taking bad decisions, bad risk. A shock to the system puts you all the way back to the beginning, where you basically stop making good decisions because you're just trying to survive, and surviving actually makes it worse because you're not making really intelligent decisions at that point. Like, it literally lowers your IQ by 15 points. So having a bit of slack, a bit of an emergency fund, so a shock to your system doesn't destroy you and knock you back, actually psychologically important. And I won't begrudge somebody if all they want to do is pay the debt down first and then do the savings. I mean, that's mathematically actually optimal, but from a psychology perspective, I would try and get maybe 50-50, between the two priorities, save up like a month, 2 months of an emergency fund and pay debt down. And once you have that, like say 2 months saved, then put all the money into debt. But again, it's not a sin if you want to just pay the credit cards first. And
I mean, I told you, I have a very good friend who was going through it. They lost a job for 10 months, and because they had saved all of their previous years, they got through the 10 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It took them a minute. They got a job, and now they're back in the mix, and they'll be able to get their savings back. You know what I mean? To balance and everything. And when I think about what would have happened to them if they hadn't done all that preparation, I mean, who knows what would have happened?
Yeah. And the goal, by the way, is, the goal is not to have 2 months. The goal is to have 6 to maybe even 18. It really depends on what kind of job you have. Like if it's seasonal or fluctuates or it's about to be displaced by AI, what outsourcing did for blue collar jobs, AI is going to do for white collar jobs. So you've been warned. So
noted.
Nothing personal, but like we're about to, we're all about to be unemployed. So, you want to get that savings up, but right now I just want to have you maybe like 1 to 2 months of savings and get that debt down. So I really want people to make a plan. Remember, so let's go back to the diagnostic we did. We did that diagnostic where you listed all of your debts and all of your net worth, like all your assets, all your liabilities, right? And I had you rank them in order of highest interest. You're going to figure out a plan to pay those debts off starting at the highest interest. Not this, if you want to knock 1 or 2 out just because it feels good, you can, but you should do it mathematically with the highest interest ones. Make the minimum payments for the others. And you need to do everything in your power to either increase your income or decrease your spend to have a plan so then in 12 months you can get that paid off. Some plans will go up to say 2 years, but if you can't get out of this debt in 2 to 3 years, you really need to be looking at other options. Maybe just starting over, because
you're
at that
in really
point,
big trouble.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But your goal is you're going to create a plan of how you're going to minimize spend, maximize your income, maybe second jobs. It maybe you have to do other things for side hustles. Maybe you sell some assets off. That balance sheet, do you really need all those things? And it's a sad thing to say, but you're in survival mode right now. You cannot build wealth if you're in the red zone. It's just, you can't. There's no way.
Should I start an OnlyFans? Is that viable?
What I was going to say? I don't know if teenagers are watching this podcast, so I'll leave it at thought crime, but
that was a joke for anybody who was wondering.
Actually, his feet are up, but I didn't want to say it. But okay.
What does someone need to do? We talked about what someone needs to do to get out of the red zone. So here we go. Do people need a budget? Right. Let's talk about that, because I struggle with actually having a budget, because technically, like I said, I kind of cut. Like I don't have Netflix. I don't have a lot of these other things, and I don't do any frivolous spending. But I still need to like comb through my mind.
Yeah, and it's in the red zone. You really have to budget. I when I teach this class live, I say a spending plan. So I don't say the B word, because budget, like people literally are taking cyanide tablets and, committing ritual seppuku on the side of the seminar room. So that's not a good thing. Budget really sets people off. It triggers, but it's a budget, whatever you want to call it. You need to direct your dollars where to go. I am a big proponent. I've said this all the way through. The goal is not to be a semi-monastic monk where you can't have any fun. However, in the red zone, that's kind of what you have to do a little bit. I mean, you're going to really cut back, and it's not because that's the way you should live your life. It's because you need to get where you can build wealth so you don't have to live like that. Like, there's hard in life, right? Do you want hard now for like a year? Or do you want hard when you're eating Alpo dog food in retirement? I mean, which hard do you want? So if you get into the situation, there's no shame. A lot of people at some point in their life are financially desperate and are in this zone, but you really have to do whatever you can. It's obviously easier to increase your earnings than it is to cut spending, but you need to do both. And, we talked earlier in a previous session about the three categories: necessities, wants, and then savings and investments. Basically 75 percent of your money should be to necessities and paying debt down, maybe 90%. 0% will go to savings and investments other than that emergency fund. And you should have some wants, because if you don't spend 10 or 15% on wants, you will just shut this whole thing down.
Yeah, because it just becomes just managing the ledger and you feel like your life sucks.
Yeah. And I, it's counterintuitive, but sometimes a little bit of indulgence makes better compliance. Like a perfect plan never complied with or circumvented or sabotaged is worse than a good enough plan that's actually followed. So, you need to do whatever it takes. In a normal situation, there's kind of two rules people use, like, the 50, 30, 20 rule, like 50% of your expenditures are fixed costs or necessities, 30% for discretionary or fun things, and 20% to savings. Some books advocate like 60, 10, 10, 10, 10, which is like 60% to taxes, food, required bills, 10% retirement, 10% long-term savings, 10% short-term and unusual things you want to save for, and then 10% just fun money. It doesn't really matter how you do it. The one thing I will say is if you find yourself in a situation where your housing costs are more than, say, 30, 35% of your take-home pay, you're going to struggle. And for whatever it's worth, sociologically, I think I've mentioned this, at least to you, whether it was on one of the tapes, I don't remember, in areas where housing costs are more than 30% of take-home pay, like every social ill starts to like take off, like whether it's addictions or abuse or violence against women. Yeah. So
wait, are you saying I have to leave California? Sounds like you're saying to leave Cali.
I don't want the franchise tax board angrier at me than I am since I'm in Vegas, but for a lot of people, they actually are living way above that number, and it's tough. I mean, this is one of the great unspoken drivers of desperation. Is I'm not here to sort of opine about what's happened to the middle class, and we can do that. Maybe in the last session we should do a wrap up of like more philosophical things. I'm just here to talk about what to do without talking about how we got in this mess as a world. But when you are in the red zone, this goes out the window. It's every spare dollar needs to go to paying the debt down, and you need to earn more dollars, truly. And, in terms of how you budget, I mentioned earlier that my grandparents, who were Depression era, kids basically, had an envelope system. So, they had the envelope that said this was the rent money, this was the fund money, this was the food money. And when the envelope ran out, that was it for the whole month. And, there's different software packages that do this. You may hear the term zero-based budgeting, zero-sum budgeting. You can have an app that does this. You can use paper. You can literally use envelopes. No one does cash, but cash will keep you from spending more money because again, when it's credit card or digital, you'll spend way, way more, like 30, 40% more. The point is every dollar has a purpose and you tell it at the beginning of the month what you want it to do. So you have things that will like happen, like your car will break down. That's what the emergency fund's for. You'll have some things that are going to happen, but you don't know when, like your average car maintenance cost maybe like, $1,000 over the course of a year. It just happened to be in August, but you roll that envelope over basically, metaphorically or a reality. But you got to be really committed to this. If you're in the hole, this also will create good habits. If you have a partner or friends, this is a really good opportunity to create sort of a buddy system where you all are in on this together. People become the sum total of the 5 people they hang out with the most. And, a lot of financial abuse that we talked about in one of the first sessions comes when people are hiding money things from each other. So
yeah, that's a real thing. Well, my friend is Ray. So me and Ray are going to make this happen together.
Yeah.
But now, like, what if there is no way out realistically? Like, for the people that are really hitting the wall, how do they begin?
Yeah, before I get there, I'll just say one thing because it just came to my mind is, a lot of people don't want a budget. So they talk about mindfulness and spending. As long as you're mindful, it's like kind of new agey, right? We're going to do crystals and sing Kumbaya. But I think you should be mindful and think about what joy it brings you and whether it's a good thing. However, when you're in the red zone, it's panic time. So you need to just be committed to this here. But all right. So if you can't pay down within like a year or two, and, I give examples in the classes of going through actual real budgets where I go through someone, like as a real person, I change the name and the stuff, but I go through their budget, create a plan, show how over the course of time they were able to do it. But if you can't, with all of the things that I recommend, which is, increase your income, cut your spending to bare bones with some enjoyment. If you can't get out of that hole in say a year or two, you need to take more drastic measures. So there's going to be 2 phases here. One is, can you negotiate some room? And then the next phase is you just pull the plug and say it's time to drown the puppy, metaphorically. No dog should be harmed here. Metaphor. So, you can call your lenders to try and renegotiate. The problem is they'll report you to credit bureaus and, that may be an okay thing to do, but sometimes they won't. I told you a story earlier about USAA being so wonderful. They dropped my card to 3% because of a situation I didn't create. They wanted to help me out and do a solid, and I'm forever loyal for that. Sometimes you can get reduced rates and consolidate. There are zero balance transfer cards. Those things are a little bit like crack. I mean, if you're just getting addicted, it's not really helping. But the point of that is it gives you a stay of execution. So at least you can pay 0% for that year. A friend of mine did that recently. She lives in Los Angeles and she had like 30,000 of credit card debt. And she was able to get 0% cards because her credit score is actually quite good. And that gave her the breathing room to get these things paid off over the course of like 12 months. And so that's not always an option. Right. But it can be an option for some people. A lot of people will do things like take second mortgages. Some people turn to these consolidation loans, some of which are legit, a lot of which are scams. And so be very careful, about that. Do your research. And there's plenty of consumer oriented research on the web if you look at these things. But here's the thing is if you can't get to a place where you can pay it down, you're effectively robbing your future. I mean, think about this as just sort of a math problem. Put the morality of bankruptcy aside. Like, I grew up where bankruptcy was a moral failure. You were a loser. You couldn't face the world because you reneged on your debts. And, I think there's still a bit of that in all of us, like the shame. But if you're going to spend 18 to 24 months or 36 months paying this off, or you can't, no matter what you do, sometimes you want the clean start. Just take the clean start and then make sure you have the good habits going forward. I mean, the problem is most people who declare bankruptcy don't change their habits. And so I have another friend who declared bankruptcy in 2023, and she's back in the same kind of debt she was. Of course, you can't declare again because there's a time limit before you can do this twice. So if you're going to do a clean start, you actually have to start over and do this the right way. And you can protect certain things, by the way, in bankruptcy. I mean, certain things you can't get out of, like student loans, unpaid child support, alimony, taxes, debts you don't list. If you have like embezzlement or fraud, you can't discharge that. But you can protect certain things either. And this varies state by state. But, if you own a house, you can protect in almost every state a certain amount of equity. It's a state law thing. So, it depends on where you are. There are certain assets you may be able to protect. You can choose to elect to continue certain debts and say, I'll continue the car payment, for example. So you should get legal help or professional help here. But I want to make the point again, it sounds heroic and noble to do everything in your power to avoid bankruptcy. But if you're basically mortgaging your entire future and getting rid of all that equity and liquidating your retirement, by the way, retirement plans are protected in bankruptcy typically. I mean, there's exceptions, but like up to like 1.7 million or something, your 401k is protected. Don't empty that and sacrifice for a plan that's never going to work anyway.
No, that makes sense.
I mean, if it's not going to, it's like those old TV shows with the doctor comes out and says, we use all available technology, but we couldn't save the patient. They get the paddles careful. Like if you can't get the heart going, let it go.
No, let it go. But then what do you say about like debt collectors? Like, again, I don't have a lot of credit cards, so nobody hits me up about much really. But like, I know you always see like crazy articles. And I knew a lady who she let me hear what the debt collector was saying to her. She had him on, and like this guy was just sitting at his house saying the worst stuff. And I was just like, why would you even want to pay people back when they're hiring people who talk to you like this and stuff like that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. If you do, I mean, if you're ducking calls from debt collectors, you're in the red zone. The Jeff Foxworthy, you might be a redneck if you might be in the red zone if you're ducking debt collector calls. First of all, stick to your plan to pay it down according to your schedule, not theirs. I mean, make the minimum payments, obviously, but you're not there to please some random person who's paid to harass you. You're there to make the right financial decisions. Know your rights. I could do a whole class on this, but you can Google this one. So you don't need me for that, but know what your rights are, dispute, get proof that this is a valid debt. At least it buys you a little bit of time. If you agree to pay, get it in writing first. I cannot emphasize this enough. Get it in writing first. One of the greatest and most common sources of abuse is people who think they have a deal and the debt collector says that's not what we agreed to or reneges on it. And never, ever, ever give anyone your banking details. You will send them the payment. You do not give them the ACH. They suck out of your account because they will suck the whole thing and then
all the way.
And they'll screw you up with all your
every time.
Stuff.
Yeah, no, it's real.
But debt collectors are I don't know if people in the Epstein ring are more higher or lower than debt collectors in public esteem. They're close, which is sad for debt collectors, but there are regulations that are supposed to apply at the state and federal level. You can complain. Yeah. We used to have a Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. Hey, no more. But once upon a time, it's gotten worse, is my impression from just kind of reading about this, because I kind of looked at some forums, in advance of this session to kind of see how the lay of the land was. But the most important thing is you create your plan. You figure it out. If you compromise a debt, realize they will report that to the credit bureau, which is okay if that's what it takes.
Right.
Because bankruptcy is going to screw up your credit report too, but don't despair. Like after 2 years of someone filing a full-on bankruptcy, 20%, 28% had scores of at least 620. And after 4 years, half of people did.
Well, that's what I was going to ask.
You can resuscitate this.
I got a friend who's feeling down in the dumps and kind of on the ropes, like he might need to declare bankruptcy. And I don't know nothing about nothing, but I feel like it's not the end of the world. But how do you recover from a bankruptcy? You just wait it out?
You build good habits. By the way, don't do a 13, do a 7. I mean, like there's almost no circumstance where chapter 13 makes sense. I will get angry letters from bankruptcy attorneys, and they'll try and sell you on that because they get more fees and stuff. But just start clean, honestly. The way you rehabilitate is you start with the clean habits. Live within your means, find housing you can afford, even if it's not your ideal. Fix your spending, find free things in life like walking outdoors, taking walks, like reading, things that don't, maybe you don't have like 15 subscriptions for things you're not going to watch all the time, or rotate, Netflix this month and I'm going to cancel it and go to like HBO, whatever. I mean, if you have to do that stuff, but you have to figure out a way to increase your income and decrease your spend so you can live comfortably and start building wealth. It's just like starting out. There's certain cards you're going to be able to get and most you won't be able to. They're not going to have great rates, but if you pay them off, that's fine. You just have to learn this stuff. Like if you go through bankruptcy, I really beg you, watch these classes and for whatever it's worth. I don't know if I said this, but I'll say it. There are nominal fees to watch these classes because, people that can pay, you can help pay for people who can't, because I want to hire trauma trained counselors to do this in like Title I high schools. But on the site, it says if you're going through bankruptcy or you're under, like, I can't remember if it's 150% the poverty level, 200%, the classes are free. Like if you can't afford it, just pop me an email, and the codes are right on the website to get the discounts. But no one will be turned away if you need this. Like if you're looking at bankruptcy, you need to watch these classes because you want to rebuild right.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about rebuilding right. Like what are like 7 habits that we can discuss so people can start to set the ship aright?
Yeah, and I think you're referring to the 7 habits they talk about in the class. Like, how do you think about spending? Because I don't want it to be bad dog, you spend too much. Because the problem when you're in the red zone, it's impossible not to kind of feel some shame and feel bad about this because you're paying the price. I don't want that to last. And I actually don't want that to be the way people relate to money. So let me give some positive here to uplift a bit. So, the first thing I talk about in the class is the first lesson is be conscious of the total cost of ownership and the value of something. What is the cost over a lifetime? There is a tax on the poor because all of our stuff breaks, right? When I was a kid, I would get some cheap piece of plastic or, a cheap sneaker from Kmart, and it would have to be replaced like every 6 months. Whereas someone who could afford a nice, pair of tennis shoes, they could last like 3 years. So the poor end up paying more because you're buying the thing 3 or 4 times. Now, that said, expensive things don't always last longer. Sometimes buying a more expensive thing is just a more expensive thing that's going to break. So, but look for the quality and the total lifetime. Like, okay, maybe this car is a little more expensive, but its repair history factored in, it's actually a cheaper car. Maybe it appreciates as an asset. Most assets depreciate. They go down in value. Some go up. So think about the hidden costs over time. What over 5 years will this actually cost me? And what value do I derive from it? Do I truly derive value? And I'm not even necessarily meaning like, does it bring me joy? Although if there's things that do, go for it. But does this help you increase your income? Is this something that is going to go up in worth? Does this give you protection in life against some, negative thing that could happen? So, I don't want to get into houses here because for some people, that's usually where this question goes in the Q&A. We can do that maybe in the last session or something.
No, that's fair.
But total cost of ownership, not the price, but what is this going to cost me throughout in the next 5 years? What is this going to cost truly?
No, I like that. It makes sense. So when we're going through, so wait, you went through 2 of the 7?
No, that's number 1. So the second one is take care of your stuff.
This is crucial.
Man, we are in a throwaway, disposable society, and you
Totally.
destroy value when you don't take care of your stuff. Like, if you have nice shoes, you take care of them. You keep them, clean.
Your computer.
The computer. Yeah, it's, people just throw away stuff. And by the way, that's planned obsolescence. Like that's by design, but get out of that mentality because you take care of your stuff, it takes care of you over time. And that's part of a corollary to lesson 1, which is, buy things of quality and then take care of them.
One thing I will suggest is there's a great documentary on PBS called Century of the Self. And it's about why people buy stuff. Like, how did America become just mass consumers, and like what made that world happen? It's all in a documentary that's factual from the BBC. It's called Century of the Self. like definitely look into that and take care of your stuff.
Yeah. Third lesson I had is be frugal, but not cheap. A frugal person, you get maximum value from what you buy. You exhaust your assets. Like I drive my cars 200,000 miles because, until it won't go anymore or it literally makes no sense to maintain it, I'm just going to drive that baby. Really look at recurring expenses and only do the ones you need. Know the opportunity cost of a purchase. Like if I do this, I can't do something else. And also your time has value. So be thoughtful about that. So, there's a difference between frugal and cheap. Like a cheap person's all about the price and it's all that matters. Frugal is more about the value to your bottom line.
I have a question for you though.
Okay.
Specifically when it comes to cars, are you more of a buy or lease person and why?
Never lease. I mean, that's the wrong dichotomy. The correct choices would have been new car or slightly used car, like within the first few years. And, the math, I mean, people can send me hate emails because I've gotten a few of them on this. I think the fairly obvious mathematical answer is you buy a car that's like 2 or 3 years old and it's in good shape and you make sure it is and have it inspected because it's depreciated. Like, well, lately it's been weird because we're post-COVID still and we have tariffs. And so our economy is messed up. But, in normal times, you're paying like, half, sometimes 60% of what the new one was, and you're going to get most of the same value. I don't have an objection to buying new if you're going to run the thing in the ground. I mean, that's just a matter of taste. I mean, it's a slight error, but it's not a big error, and the joy you get can be fine. Not a fan of leasing. I've never seen a situation where leasing actually makes sense. I mean, a friend of mine argued with me and said it makes sense to lease certain electric cars until the battery life gets better. Maybe, I'm sure that people have done this analysis and, you can just Google it and find people arguing about this on the internet because that's what the internet is for. But, I think it depends on where you are. If you're trying to be money conscious, a slightly used car is almost always your best bet. And from a good brand that doesn't require lots of repair, I
don't think I'm ever going to have a brand new car again. I just don't. I'm rocking with used homies.
Yeah, I broke down and got a new car, but I'm also going to drive it like, 11 years or 12 years. So it is a treat, but I could afford it. And, when my first few cars, I didn't do that. My first few were used, when I was starting out. Yeah. So, but I wouldn't do that when you're beginning where it's a financial burden. And, the one thing I will asterisk, given tariffs, given everything that's going on and tax credits and other things, sometimes the analysis is a little different than in normal times.
Right. And you got to pay attention.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the other things we want to make sure we're doing?
Number 4, negotiate for big ticket items. If you negotiate for everything, like you're gonna, you can just irritate everybody. I mean, we don't live in a negotiation culture like, say, the Middle East or
right.
Asia,
Middle East is all about that.
Where everything you have to haggle. Like I have so many stories where I do business in the Middle East and Asia, and I'm like, I'll just pay $5 for this chess set because I don't really care, And they're like, no, you have to insult me. You have to say 2, and then it's like, it's $3. It's not worth the effort, but. However, by the way, nothing to do with finance. I was actually haggling in Amman, Jordan for a chess set for my oldest daughter. I think you played her once in a chess tournament, actually.
Yeah, she killed me.
Is a hip hop chess event. We were together in that. But I tried to speak some Arabic, and the guy says, and he starts laughing. He says, okay, wait. And he brings his wife and says, okay, say it again. And I say it again, and she laughs. And they go bring the guy next door. And he laughs. And I was like, what did I say? He's like, oh, no, we understood what you meant. So haggling can lead to at least people laughing at Americans, which is a good thing for us in the world today. We need more of that joy. However, getting back to the point here, big ticket items you can negotiate for. And sometimes you get extra things thrown in. You can get different payment terms. If you actually do buy a new car, which is horrific, if you're not using like a service that takes care of all the stuff for you, there's some tricks you can use that will get your price down. But you'll get a better deal. I'll tell you how my daughter, my oldest, say Amelia, the oldest one, she has a Toyota. And what we did is we sent faxes. It's been a while. And maybe a few emails, but mostly faxes to like 11 dealers in Northern California. We said, this is exactly the car. This is the build. Give us your quote, best ones. And the difference between top and bottom was like $5,800. for the same car. It's literally a commodity. It's the same car. It's crazy, and you fall into these traps.
That's huge.
It's a lot of money, and she has a kid going to college. That's material, right? But that's what you can save money by negotiating and putting pressure on people to make sure they give you the best. So I wouldn't spend your life trying to haggle everyone down because it just gets tiresome. But unless you enjoy it, go for it.
Right. That's your lifestyle.
But on big ticket items, it actually does matter sometimes. I mean, those things add up, really.
Okay. So then that leaves us with 3.
We're down to 5. So number 5 is create good spending habits and break bad habits. So we didn't really spend time in the classes. They talk about the book Tiny Habits.
Right. You do.
Yeah, BJ Fogg, the Stanford professor, and there's like Atomic Habits, and there's tons of books on this, but it's all based on the same neuroscience of how you use tiny, achievable habits and reward to have triggers that lead to new things. You don't look at motivation and say, "Oh, I can't do this. I lack will." You just figure out, how do I trigger good small habits that are achievable and celebrate that. So use those systems, and people can Google this or just go to any AI and say, summarize tiny habits, for me.
Do you have a preferred habits book though? Because there are so many, and I'm not trying to nail you down, but do you have one?
Everyone seems to like Atomic Habits. Tiny Habits is what I read first because a friend of mine teaches at Stanford with him in the same department, and so it's just. I went to Stanford, so I'm a hometown kid, I guess, but they're all fundamentally fine. I just want you
just get on the concept, really.
To get the concept of small, good habits to control your spending. And I will add to this the addendum, which is 5B. That was 5A. 5B is automate so that systems take control. Remember, and we'll talk more about how you divert money, but once you get out of the red zone where you can breathe a little bit, you literally will get to a situation where you will say, paycheck comes in on the 1st, on the 2nd, $1,000 goes here, 500 goes here, 620 goes here, all the automatic payments go out, and then what's left I get to play with. You'll have it automated.
I look so forward to having that set up for myself.
And you set it up once. I mean, check it every year, sometimes every 6 months. But laziness can pay off if you do it right, and you will fall.
I believe you.
Yeah, you don't aspire to your aspirations; you fall to your systems. And every sports coach has said that. So I'm just
It's true.
So, the 6th thing I would say is invest your bonuses and raises. The biggest thing that kills people is they fully live their new lifestyle, and sometimes more than that. There's an old joke that a bonus is spent 3 times. You spend it when you think you're going to get it, you spend it when you get it, and your spouse has spent it too, not telling you. And so
true.
And so you don't actually get the benefit of the increased income. You just have more spend.
Yeah.
So one thing that some companies have started experimenting with is that half your raise automatically goes into the company 401k or 403b if you're a nonprofit, same thing. And so you're not getting the full amount in your bank account.
I like that.
Even if they don't do that, you should do that too. Do not increase your lifestyle with raises until you hit all your priorities. If you want to be able to play to celebrate, you're going to go to, you want to go to Thailand because you've always dreamed of it, save for it and it makes sense, and you can still meet milestones, that's fine. But keep your lifestyle in check until you're really in the yellow and green zones and you're meeting all your targets. Okay. You will be so grateful later in life for that, because again, it's exponential. The earlier you start, the better you're going to be. The biggest thing you can do is this. Cutting spending is so hard. It is so hard to cut your spend. Don't increase your lifestyle.
I think it is for a lot of people. For me, it's not. I think I've always been blessed with, I don't care that much about cool stuff.
Yeah, so, you are not a representative sample.
No, I know. No, it's true. It's true. That's the thing. You know what I mean? The one thing I know I can do better is eat more at home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's one thing I know I can do better. But I'm not the type of person, like I said, to buy shoes and jackets. I'm definitely not the person blingless, you know what I mean? No watch, you know? So it's just like I'm not big on a lot of the things that so I'm lucky in that regard, but I'm still not deliberate. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
in terms of my impulses, I'm lucky, but I'm still not deliberate in terms of my systems. So
Yeah, I
that's
mean, one of the things you have going for you is the stoic base in which you live your life. I mean,
yeah,
that makes a huge difference because you are naturally intentional about all of your actions, money being just a subset of that.
yeah,
I think for a lot of people, money owns them. They don't own money. Money tells them what to do. They don't tell the money what to do. And that little shift in mindset will do absolute wonders for you.
yeah.
Money should not control you. You should control money.
I agree.
And I think for most people, money controls them. Like
Yep.
and by the way, it's not always everyone's fault. Like I said in one of the first lessons, I mean, we have multiple multi-trillion-dollar industries hunting us like, prey, and they're the predators.
Yeah,
And they're good
and
at
they
this.
don't stop. They don't even now with when the digital age. At least for a while they would go off at night when TV went off, but it's not like that anymore.
Yeah.
They're in your
And-
phone. They're in all your different apps. It's everywhere.
Yeah, that's the reason they're multi-trillion-dollar industries. They're good, and they know how to
Yeah.
use our brain and manipulate us. And so, a Stoic philosophy is a very good thing for this. If you have that, you will naturally find everything I'm saying like kind of like obvious.
Yeah, easier to identify with. Yeah.
And if you haven't, you're like, what is this strange stuff this David guy is talking about? Not just spending money whenever I feel like it.
No. Yeah. No. Totally.
And the final lesson of the seven was really focus on making more. And I said this in the beginning of this kind of series, but I'll say it again. The way I think about demystifying wealth is there's financial wealth, which is what we're talking about today, right? Which is just what do you do just to manage the money you have? You work again 80,000 hours a year. Can you spend 10 or in a lifetime? Sorry. Can you spend 10 just figuring it out? The second part is, the wealth that allows you personal wealth to create more to put your vision in the world. And there's creative wealth, which is actually maybe being entrepreneurial. But what I'd like to do is continue, when we're done with the pure finance stuff, which is how do you become a lifelong learner? How do you get a higher paying job? How do you turn your passions into things that can create income for you? How can you be an entrepreneur, even if it's on a minor scale? Like you don't have to be a startup entrepreneur with venture financing, creating
Right.
$1 billion company, but something that allows you to live the way you want and create what you want and leave a legacy. So you're not just working for somebody else. Like you're making someone else rich, or you can make yourself rich, right?
Totally.
So I really want people focused on making more because it allows you to more quickly get into these zones where you're saving and building wealth. And then you have those choices. Do I really want to work this hard? Would I rather teach in a Title I high school of a high income or high poverty area, low income? Do I want to travel more? Would I go to, I know people have gone and work in the Peace Corps in their 40s and 50s. You have those choices when you've made more money earlier and you've done the other things that you're supposed to, which is save, invest, build wealth, all the stuff we're going to talk about in the future, all the once you're out of the red zone. So money doesn't have to be hard. The reason why the red zone matters is so many of us are here. And even if we're not, we know people who are. And you can't do anything once you're stuck here. So all of these wonderful, fanciful things like the unicorns and ponies that I'm talking about, like you can max your 401k. This is nonsensical when someone can't make ends meet.
It's drowning.
And I will say this because it deserves to be said. If you make too little, none of this is going to work. And a good portion of the economy today is effectively subsistence. From actually how you live. If you look at the poverty rate, if it had stayed current with the actual cost of living and used the same methodology of computation as it did in the 1960s, it would be double or triple what it is right now. And minimum wage, of course, is a joke.
Yeah.
So, what is a comfortable life is no bearing whatsoever to what we think of as either poverty or the minimum wage. And so I have sympathy for people because I have people who they yell at me not because they're bad people, but they're just so exasperated. Like, but and the short version would be, how can you stand up here with a straight face and tell me to pull myself up by my bootstraps when I don't have boots?
Yeah.
And I can't even make enough because I'm making minimum wage and I'm juggling multiple jobs. I'm a single mom, and sometimes that's legitimate. Oftentimes it is.
For sure.
Other times, when you actually dig into their statements, they're making like 90,000 and they're spending like a drum.
They're just no, it's real. It's real.
And so you your mileage varies here, but there is something to be said that if you don't have skills or a strategy to make more and control your destiny, you're the pinata in the system. People are just beating to get the candy out, and the people beating are the ones in the financial industry hustling you, and you will forever just be a punching bag. Which is why the financial literacy part itself, although important, can't be all of it. It has to continue on to say, how do you create? How do you put your vision? How do you create extra income? How do you be entrepreneurial? How do you use the best tools that Silicon Valley's perfected, even if it's just a side hustle? How do you do that? Because I don't want people being punching bags and pinatas. I mean, for most people, if you can find emotional and financial safety enough to reflect and think about this, there are good answers. If you're just surviving, that's a luxury.
Yeah. No,
and I do know that. Like, I'm not naive about that, but I want to find ways for people to have that where they can say, okay, I've got 6 months. It took a lot. It wore me out, but now I can start making important decisions, not just the urgent. Remember, because important what gets thrown away when you're tunneling.
Oh, man.
And how do I create things? I want to get people to that point. And just to reflect on it, I think when I started, I'd mentioned this. I didn't set out to teach the financial literacy part. I wanted to teach entrepreneurship because that's what I love.
Yep.
Everyone demanded this because it's the same story. It's like, this is wonderful, but I have 20,000 credit card debt.
Yeah, I can't even get to this point to have the fun.
Yeah, like, you're speaking Sanskrit, man. What the hell's wrong with you? So it was so tone deaf. And so this is, again, the 0th floor, the foundation of financial and therefore emotional and psychological safety. So you can start thinking about, how do I educate myself and become a learner and put things into the world and create a venture or a project and improve myself, because you can't do that when your mind is just like acting like a predator's chasing you on the African savannah, because that's what it is physiologically. For us, right?
Oh, I agree, man. Well, listen, thank you so much, man, for this particular episode. Thank you for all of it, but thank you for this particular episode. Remember, people, if you are watching, if you are listening, go to demystifyingwealth.com, go to demystifyingsiliconvalley.com, and get the deeper dives on all of these topics, because they're necessary. Every time we do a show, I get at least 2 or 3 different people say, I needed that episode. I'm loving it. I think I sent you one today. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got like 4 or 5 questions. Maybe at the end we should do a Q&A, because I have like all these questions.
Yeah, no. It's important, right? So you guys, we're going to keep doing this, right? Like I said, I got, David around, got some other guests I'm going to be bringing on, so we can be getting our money right, be getting our mental health, our emotional health right, our physical health right, so we can be the better people that we envision. It's going to take some work, but luckily people like David and platforms like Demystifying Silicon Valley are here to help. So thanks so much, man. Looking forward to seeing you next week. It will be on an actual Monday. I'm back in the building.
Hey, next week we'll talk about what you should be investing in. Like, I'll give you some.
Yes.
Well, part of it will be like, I call it mixology, so it sounds a bit like alcoholic. It gets people to pay attention. But like, how do you mix different brews of investing?
Yeah.
If you want to do that, you can just do the index fund. But I'll show you. I'll show the target date, but I'll show you how to do it. So we'll finally get to the wealth building part.
I love that. All right, y'all. Enjoy this episode. Share it with at least 2 people you really think need it, right? I'm not going to send it to all your friends. 2 people. I know 2 people who could grow from this episode alone, let alone the previous. So
I love that. Find 5 people and do this as a group and hold each other accountable.
There you go. All right. Have a blessed one, and we'll see you soon on Bishop Chronicles.